Okay, I'm going to run through real quick how to properly use a grade, the way that compositors typically like to do it. So in this case, I have an image that I want to put like a glow on this sign. It's the same image I have on the Moodle page and that I use in like the reference file that y'all can play with. But pretend in this case, I'm pulling a key on this so I have all this text, but basically I made an alpha mask of that text on there. Don't worry about that, but this could be any shape that y'all have made with a roto paint or anything like that. And I just copied it over just like we're doing when we're embedding channels into here. So now it lives in this file. So here's my image. I want to put a blur. Out of the box, if you put, I don't want a grade, I want a glow. So if I put a glow on something, you just tab and start typing glow. There's no hotkey for glow, unfortunately. If I just apply a glow out of the box, it's going to glow everything. And it's kind of just an average, decent-ish kind of glow. If I want to apply a mask to it, there's a couple things you got to keep in mind. So first, by default, when we apply masks, pretty much anywhere else, like on a grade or anything, you're always going to do it down here in this little mask pull down box. And you have one in here. Problem is when you use it, so if I put the sign in there, if I use it, it doesn't look like anything's happening. So I can crank this up and down and you can see it actually is, but a mask is going to limit stuff specifically. It cannot go beyond the shape of the mask, which in this case is this. So it literally cannot blur out past here. And that's what makes a blur or a glow look like a glow, is when it actually expands beyond the edge of the forms that it's on. That's why neon and all that stuff tends to have that soft hazy glow on it. So for this, if we apply that down there like that, it goes from just kind of something, I made that really bright, something that you can see pretty clearly where the glow is happening here, to if I mask it off by just that sign mask, it's doing stuff, but it's basically not usable. So the way we get around that is a couple different ways, but the most common one is just to use this width channel up here. That's basically saying mask off where the glow emanates from the mask that I have, but like it's allowed to spill beyond that. So like here you can see, gives me what I'm talking about. So now it's masked by that stuff, but it's still able to glow out and do fun stuff. So out of the box, masked off, this is what a glow will look like for you. To adjust it, really the only sliders you're ever going to mess with in here is going to be the size slider down here, which just determines how tight or how broad your glow is. So tight, broad. The brightness, adjust brightness. Pretty straightforward. It has a saturation slider and a tint slider if you wanted to play with it. Like you can tint stuff in here. Like I'll make that like kind of reddish so you can see. Makes it a little easier to see. This is really a nice tool if you're trying to add some color into things. More neon is typically, not neon, but just anything that glows sometimes can benefit, especially if it's supposed to be a light source, from having a little bit of different colors added to the stuff that you're glowing. So something you can play with. You can dial that in. But the main one you're going to have to fiddle with here is this tolerance slider. So 0 means it is incredibly tolerant. 1, not so much, not at all. So think of it in those sort of terms. If the tolerance is at 0, it is incredibly tolerant of everything. So it's basically anything bright in the image, even remotely bright, like you can see when we didn't have this masked off. Pretty much everything but the blacks in this image is glowing. If I dial that in, if I start kind of playing with that, you can kind of see only the brightest areas start to glow. So it starts refining it. So this is really going to be for refinement. So if I go like mega ultra tight, I can even kind of get it almost only on that sign because it's one of the brighter things there, but it's also going to get other spots. So in the case of our sign, you can kind of see what's happening when you tighten up on that tolerance is the little fine details are going to start to not be accounted for. So all glows have this set in here for effect only, and you can actually always click on and see. It shows you exactly what your glow is creating. So in this case, like if I played with that slider, you can kind of see what's the first to go when I choke up on it. So I'll show you in a second how to use the effect only. But in this case, if I just want to mask off by my width channel, I will get that cool looking glow. So this is the better way to use a glow. But in reality, when most compositors use a glow, they typically use two, at least two, sometimes three. Heck, I've used up to like 10 of them before if you need to. If you need something to have a really poppy, like really saturated, crazy, like bright core to it, like glowy things typically do. If it's got like a light source, like a lightning bolt or fire or something like that, it usually looks a little more natural to have at least two. So I am a big fan of duplicating my work so I can save some time. So if you grab the glow that you have and Control C, and then just with it still selected, Control V, it'll automatically hook up this next one. It has all the same settings. So I like doing it this way because it lets me then take what I already set keys on, or not set keys, but when I already dialed in, and I can like pull this back to make a tighter version. So what I mean by that is typically for your broad glow, like this would be a pretty decent broad glow, just the one that we started with. But now I want something a little more tight, kind of a little closer to the shape of the letters and the mask itself. So in this case, first thing I'd probably do is choke up on the size. So you can see if it's all the way down, you don't even hardly see it. So I'm going to go where I can just start to see some stuff. Like that's pretty nice. And then you can dial in the brightness, make it brighter, smaller, whatever you need it to do. But the tolerance is kind of the key here. So you can kind of different effects, especially something like this where it's got these really thin lines. I may, in this case, want to leave it kind of low, but typically for your tighter glow, you're going to want to choke up on the tolerance just a little bit at least, so you start to get something a little more specific. So something like that, as opposed to something like that. Boop. Well, that's different. I'll explain why. But so if you did something like this, then you essentially have a double glowed effect that looks a little more true to like a real glow. Oh, I turned this off. Okay. That looks a little more true to a real glow when you have the doubled up stuff going on. It starts to get really hot, really glowy, really crazy, but it looks more like a real glow. If you wanted, you could even put another one beyond this. So another way to approach this, though, that I typically prefer, so this is totally fine the way you do this here. One thing I don't like about this way, though, that I typically don't do it like this unless it's something kind of simple, is this glow that we're doing here. So I'll put the effect only on so you can see. This glow is actually being processed through what, since everything happens like falls down a line in a comp like this and falls down your B stream, it is being affected by this glow that we already put on here. And you can see that if I disable it. So you get a different result if you disable it, because it's basically that hotter, glowier version that we have here. It's looking at all of this when it's trying to calculate how to do the glow for this. So I am actually a big fan of hooking these up off to the side. So what I mean by that is typically I will pull these off to the side, kind of do the thing with them, and then merge them back on top. And that's doing that with these effect only buttons. So if I turn those on, and there's different ways to do this, but I just out of habit, the way I like to typically do it is to kind of do something like this. So if you hold down Control, you can make dot nodes. That's my cat meowing in the background. If you hold down the Control button, you can make these little yellow dot nodes, and they just help you with organization. So I typically just like to have kind of like a line that I know I can hook stuff into. But basically, I want to hook stuff in before we do all these glows. I want this glow to look at basically how the comp looks right here. I want this glow to look at how the comp looks right here. So I could just grab all this stuff and hook it in like this, but that's messy, and I don't want to do that. So just to be more neat and tidy, this is typically how it is done for something like this. Because as you can see, this just is a little neater and easier to see everything. But you just kind of keep making some dot nodes until you've organized. But essentially, if you look at it, so remember, if you select a node, you can kind of see the line light up of like where it came from. So you can see where it emanated from. But this is still just, if you follow this chain up the line here, this is still looking at the same exact spot. So it's the same thing as if I would have hooked both of these glow nodes individually up into here. So that's great. So if I view them, I can see my two different glows, my broad glow, my tight glow. So now if I wanted to, if I made a merge and I merged one of those glows on top of my image, and remember we want to change this to an additive one. You can either use plus or screen, your call. They both look very similar. I honestly usually click the first one that I see for something like glows and things. So I find pluses maybe a little bit better because you see it retains the really hot hots. But a plus, I'm going to copy that because, again, I don't like redoing my work. And if I make a new merge, I'm going to have to go set the operations for it. I don't even need to open it if I just copy the one I had. So that, I'm going to hook it in the exact same way. My B is, always has been, and will be kind of from the image itself. So if I follow that B line down, remember it's always good to have a nice straight line of all your Bs. The thing that's being added on top is going to be each of these glows. So then I'm able to take my image, add glow 1, add glow 2. And they're being calculated from the base image, not from a glow on top of each other. And then I still have the control in here that I can do other stuff if I wanted to. So if I wanted to add a grade underneath this and make it really, really red or something, I could do that. So it gives me much more flexibility to be able to do stuff in my comp with my glows. So one more note real quick on glows that's super important is where you put them. So typically with a glow, you want to put it at the very end of your comp, like at the very end of your set or of your character, whatever you're dealing with. Because if I came in here and did, so this is more apparent if you have like a mask for some other stuff. Like I had an example here from before that if you were to have something kind of like this. So in this situation, I had some crazy super nuclear glows and alien eye type deals I had put on her. And my glows are happening right here. So this is the same kind of setup I just showed you with glows being plussed on top. And then I did some for her pupil as well. But I also have that one here that's making this go black. And I know that's my sclera, so I can tell it's this one right here. So if I was to take this, turn off this other stuff I'm doing. If I was to take this, disable it, and come do it after my glows, now this example doesn't look too crazy, but you can kind of see. Let me turn my my blur off of my shape so you can see a little bit better. So if I had hard-edged masks, it's a little bit easier to see. So see how this is super hard and crunchy? It's essentially no different than if I was to go in here and, in this case, and have put my mask down in the mask channel instead of the width channel. It's being basically cut off by anything I'm doing here. So this looks fine and nice and soft and glowy, but the minute that I put a color correction of any kind, like grades and stuff like that, on top of it, it is going to chop off. I'll make it super black so you can see. It's going to chop off any of the stuff I'm doing. So like this will make sense here, like this. So this is what it would be like if you do color corrections. Like just look up here. It would be like what it's like if you did your color corrections before your glows. So you're doing all that stuff. I'm making this black. Then I'm adding my glows and it's giving me the soft, hazy, glowy edge on the sides. But if you did them after, you could risk doing this kind of stuff. So if you're in a situation where your glows just don't look glowy, you most likely have either put your glow on, masked on in the mask channel, which is easy, just change it to width channel, or you put it some sort of color corrections, grades type stuff below your glow. So definitely always put those up above so you can maintain that glow.